Hello everyone, welcome to Diplomatic Briefing. Recently, China-US relations have eased a bit, and China has started to counter foreign politicians who have used the US to carry out anti-China actions. On July 1st, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced sanctions against former Philippine Senator Tolentino, criticizing his poor conduct on China-related issues. According to the spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for some time now, a few anti-China politicians in the Philippines have acted out of their own self-interest. They have made a series of malicious remarks and actions on China-related issues, harming China's interests and undermining China-Philippines relations. The Chinese government is unwavering in its determination to safeguard national sovereignty, security, and development interests. China has decided to impose sanctions on former Philippine Senator Tolentino, who has behaved badly on China-related issues, banning him from entering mainland China, Hong Kong, and Macau. So, what exactly did Francis Tolentino do to provoke such a high-profile sanction from China? According to information checked by a Global Times reporter on the official website of the Philippine Senate, former Philippine Senator Tolentino once served as the mayor of Tagaytay City, was elected as a Philippine senator in 2019, and also served as the vice chairman of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations during the 18th Congress of the Philippines. According to a report by Singapore's Lian Hazao, Tolentino was a driving force behind the so-called Philippine Maritime Zones Law. Last November, he was one of the key figures in getting it passed. An article from a Philippine news website in May this year also mentioned that, as a member of the Marcos Jr. camp, Tolentino often positions himself as a spokesperson against China's actions in the West Philippine Sea. He is also the chairman of the Philippine Senate Special Committee on Maritime and Territorial Zones. Tolentino led the passage of the so-called Maritime Zones Law and the Archipelagic Sea Lanes Act. On November 8, 2024, the Philippine government officially enacted these two laws. This move not only attempts to illegally include China's Huangyan Island and most of the islands, reefs, and related waters of the Nansha Islands through domestic legislation. It further reinforces their illegal claims, which seriously violate China's sovereignty and interests in the South China Sea. Ding Duo, director of the Regional and Country Studies Institute at the National Institute for South China Sea Studies, pointed out that the Maritime Zones Law is essentially a way to repackage the Philippines' illegal territorial claims. By including parts of China's Nansha Islands and Huangyan Island within the defined scope, this not only violates but also obstructs the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. It is also a violation of the United Nations Charter. Ding Duo also said that it goes against relevant international law. For a long time, Tolentino has relied on his family's political influence to hold considerable sway in Philippine politics, and he has consistently maintained an anti-China stance. Within the Philippines, there has been an active push to use legislation to solidify the illegal South China Sea arbitration ruling and cement the Philippines' unlawful claims. After coming to power, Tolentino has become even more active in the Philippine public discourse. Besides frequently making malicious remarks on maritime issues, he also hypes up the so-called China threat to Philippine national security and other related topics. Within the Philippines, he fuels the narrative of a China threat, creating a sense of panic about China among the country's elite. He also claims that Chinese investment in the Philippines, especially in infrastructure projects, poses security risks to the country. In addition, he has tried to smear the normal interactions and exchanges between China and the Philippines, using accusations of espionage to undermine the atmosphere of people-to-people exchanges, and hyping up so-called Chinese spy incidents. Tolentino has even pointed fingers at the Chinese embassy in the Philippines, alleging that it signed a contract with a marketing company based in Makati. He accused them of spreading pro-China rhetoric and fake news to interfere with the Philippine midterm elections. Ding Duo pointed out that it's worth noting that Tolentino is very good at labeling people in the Philippines who take a fair and objective stance on China relations and the South China Sea issue. He often attacks rational voices in the country, accusing them of betraying Philippine interests, and uses political attacks to target his opponents. This kind of interference and sabotage in China-Philippines relations is really serious. You could say he has absolutely no political integrity or bottom line. Meanwhile, Dai Fan, the associate dean of the School of International Relations at Jinan University, also pointed out in an interview with Global Times that, Compared to some other Filipino politicians who only oppose China on specific issues, there is a difference. Tolentino, on the other hand, you could say he opposes China at every turn, and even actively plays the role of an anti-China pawn to gain political capital. He gets involved in almost every China-related topic in the Philippines and makes all sorts of outrageous remarks. You can see him everywhere. Dai Fan pointed out that, aside from frequently stirring up public opinion on the South China Sea issue, Tolentino has also acted as a loudspeaker on topics like so-called Chinese interference in Philippine elections and the accusation of Chinese Filipino spies. His words and actions not only seriously damage China-Philippines relations, but also affect the normal lives of Chinese Filipinos. Experts believe this is the reason why China has imposed sanctions on Tolentino. Banning him from entering mainland China, Hong Kong, and Macau is very necessary and highly targeted, and it can also have a strong deterrent effect. Ding Duo said that in the long run, China-Africa friendly cooperation will still be the mainstream. As for Tolentino, someone who keeps undermining China-Africa relations and shows no sign of remorse, he must pay a heavy price first, so as to ensure that China-Africa relations can develop steadily and go far. From another perspective, this sanction is also a message to those in the Philippines who are committed to promoting China-Africa cooperation. People who support China-Africa friendship are sending out positive signals, encouraging both the elites and the general public in the Philippines to spread more accurate and objective understanding about China. When responding to related questions, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wu Ling emphasized that anyone who harms China's interests will inevitably have to pay the price. It's actually quite rare for China to impose sanctions on politicians from ASEAN countries. This time, they took action against Tolentino. There are a few observations. First, Tolentino is actually a core anti-China figure within Marcos's camp, so taking action against him shows that China is not giving Marcos any face at all. If they continue with the anti-China approach, China won't go easy on them. Second, the worst impact of Tolentino is not just stirring up anti-China topics, but also attacking and smearing those in the Philippines who want to engage with China. Even the normal lives of the local Chinese community have been affected. Actually, there's a long history of people-to-people exchanges between China and the Philippines. Even though the current relationship isn't great, the exchanges between the two peoples have never really stopped. If people like Tolentino aren't countered, the damage they cause to these exchanges will make it hard for China-Philippines relations to get back on track. Third, what Tolentino is hyping up the most right now is the so-called issue of Chinese spies and interference in Philippine elections. Obviously, this is laying the groundwork for the Philippine elections 3 years from now. The Chinese side is taking action now to prepare for the next 3 years, getting ready for a public opinion battle against smearing. Fourth, don't think that banning travel to mainland China won't have much impact on Hong Kong and Macau. In fact, ASEAN has quite a lot of business and professional exchanges with Hong Kong, and there are still connections there. Some of them even own property or run businesses in Hong Kong, which isn't surprising. And once a politician retires or loses an election, like Tolentino, who just lost in the midterm elections and can't be a senator anymore, they still need to make a living. Now, the aim is to cut off the chance for anti-China politicians to benefit from China. It's also a clear message to current lawmakers: if you act as an anti-China vanguard while in office, don't expect to keep having dealings with mainland China or the Hong Kong and Macau regions. Fifth, it's worth noting that there was no direct response. When it comes to sanctions, they just made a simple statement: anyone who harms China's interests will definitely have to pay the price. Clearly, this isn't just about China-Philippines relations. Right now, US media are saying every day that the EU, Japan, South Korea, and even some ASEAN countries are offering to help the US counter China in hopes that the US will reduce tariffs. China's Ministry of Commerce and Ministry of Foreign Affairs have repeatedly warned that if any country sacrifices China's interests in exchange for something, China will definitely take countermeasures. This unnamed response clearly serves as a warning not just to Philippine politicians, but also carries a much deeper meaning. Also, it's worth mentioning that the group controlling Australia's mainstream media was recently singled out by Trump for his dissatisfaction. It's still unclear how Murdoch will deal with the negative coverage from his US media outlets, but previously, his Australian media had already started building momentum for Trump. Recently, Sky News Australia, The Australian, and others have been frequently attacking Australian Prime Minister Albanese for being too close to China, especially after Albanese failed to meet with US President Trump at the G7 summit. News about his planned visit to China quickly became a target for criticism. On July 1st, during an interview with Sky News Australia, Albanese refuted claims that he was putting the China-Australia relationship above the US-Australia relationship, even as the host deliberately tried to provoke him. When pressed further on why he had met with Chinese leaders more often than with Trump, Albanese showed obvious displeasure, furrowing his brows and saying, "Since I became Prime Minister, I have met with the US President more times. I have visited the US 5 times and China once." In May, ABC, Australian Broadcasting Corporation, revealed that Albanese was planning to visit China again later this year, which would make it his second official visit to China as Prime Minister within 2 years. As one of the Australian Prime Ministers most frequently invited to visit China, Albanese can be considered one of the more pragmatic figures among Western politicians. He doesn't want to stir up anti-China sentiment, and is even more interested in doing business with China. Looking at how the mainstream Australian media have suddenly gone on the offensive against him recently, it's worth noting that the harshest attacks have come from Sky News and The Australian, both of which are owned by Murdoch. This shows the long-term methods the US uses to control smaller allies like Australia. As long as any politician makes even a slightly objective comment about China, they'll be attacked by the mainstream media.